In the last year or two, the focus of the Intactivist community seems to have turned to foreskin positivity. Intactivists are trying to raise awareness about the benefits of foreskin, and to make men and women feel good about foreskin as a means to convince parents not to cut newborn baby boys. The problem is circumcision is a very controversial and divisive issue. After all, circumcision is child abuse, and child mutilation endorsed by society on an institutional level. Circumcision is not a topic that lends itself to any feel-good positivity. In fact, trying to bring a positive vibe to the issue of circumcision is the inappropriate tone to bring to such a vital human rights issue. I think the people who came up with the concept of foreskin positivity were inspired by the body positivity movement. If this is the case, it shows that the current leaders of the Intactivist movement are out of touch and that they have some other agendas at play. I get the impression that a lot of the current prominent Intactivists are hippie, liberal, coffeehouse feminist types. They have no idea how ridiculous the body positivity movement looks to mainstream society. A movement of narcissistic, overweight, privileged women playing the victim is not going to be taken seriously by sane people. Shallow feel-good emoting, done for emotional gratification, is off-putting and silly to normal functional people. This is going to drive normal people away from Intactivism. The only people who are going to be drawn to foreskin positivity are hippie types and people with self-esteem issues. People see body positivity activists as narcissistic people in love with themselves, who are demanding validation from the rest of society. People will also dismiss foreskin positivity as a bunch of narcissistic men obsessed with their own penises. The entire purpose of the Intactivist movement is to end the torture and mutilation of helpless baby boys. The whole axiom of our discourse should be about ending child abuse, not pontificating about how great foreskins are. Raising awareness and talking about the functions of the foreskin is also a dead end. The problem is not that people do not know that they don't have to circumcise their son. In this age of the internet, anyone can do substantial research on pretty much anything quite easily. The problem is that people in general don't give a shit about males, even if they happen to be infants. So the issue of male circumcision is never seriously addressed. Talking about educating society into not mutilating babies comes across as submissive and groveling. It is like the movement is begging people to not maim helpless baby boys. I'm not saying there's no place to talk about the functions of the foreskin, but it can't be the primary talking point of the movement. I briefly want to address the functions of the foreskin as a means to end circumcision. Intactivists have focused on this in the past as a means to convince parents that foreskin is not just some useless piece of skin that can be harmful to the health of the child. Although it is useful knowledge to have, it's bad to come out of the gate with these arguments because you're still framing the debate as the pros versus the cons aspect of circumcision. Most people get that all body parts have some evolutionary function, even if they're not physically functional. Many species have body parts that serve no function other than to attract members of the opposite sex. Breasts serve no physical function except to be sexually attractive to males. Women could still experience sexual pleasure and reproduce without breasts. The problem is the ailments that people associate with foreskin override any benefits of foreskin, especially when it comes to STDs, because that brings women into the picture. Breast cancer is far more common than any of the ailments circumcision allegedly prevents, and yet society would be horrified if we performed mastectomies on female infants. Nobody would be discussing the functions of the breasts. People would just be outraged that the bodily integrity of women was being violated. The human body has all sorts of folds and crevices. The point is that people have always thought that men are dirtier than women in general in both the mind and habit. Circumcision took off in the 19th century precisely because people had some idea that the foreskin was a source of sexual pleasure for men in intercourse and masturbation. Even today, most people could care less that the foreskin serves a sexual function. The fact that cutters say cut dicks look better should speak volumes about their intentions of pleasing women to the detriment of men. People do all sorts of body modifications to make themselves sexually attractive to the opposite sex, or accepted by the tribe. The real problem with circumcision is that it's cruel, it's done without the consent of the child, and that there are no health benefits associated with it. The problem with discussing the functions of the foreskin is that men will end up defending their own penises, and women will end up defending their sexual preferences. None of these things matter. Parental and female preference should have no bearing on a baby boy's genital integrity. Intactivism is not a lifestyle choice movement, it is a human rights movement. If the goal of intactivism is simply to save one baby at a time, why even bother? Circumcision rates are declining naturally. In fact, people like Joe Rogan, Mundane Matt, and Sargon of Akkad have done more to raise awareness amongst average people than any intactivist groups I can think of. The goal of the movement should not be to save one baby at a time by convincing expecting parents, but rather all of them collectively. MGM is still legal even in countries like the UK that stopped practicing it for medical reasons decades ago. FGM was banned in the UK in 1985 without banning MGM. At that time, nobody cared if it would offend Muslims, but nobody cared about Muslim boys either. Intactivists have it completely back to front when they talk about circumcising cultures. Circumcision only took root in the West because society didn't care about men in the first place. Both world wars boosted circumcision rates across the English-speaking world. Society is indifferent towards men coming home from wars in body bags or crippled. Why would it care about their sexual pleasure? There's not enough talk about outlawing circumcision. Intactivists need to stop caring about whether such bans will offend religious minorities. If you believe circumcision is mutilation, then the only logical conclusion is to call for the outlawing of it completely, altogether, all over the world. You don't see feminists talking to Western parents trying to convince them not to cut their daughters. No, they demand that the government do something and put its nose in the business of foreign governments where it does still happen. Even animal rights activists and conservationists are more aggressive. I see vegan propaganda billboards on the sides of highways everywhere, even though vegans are a very small minority of the population. They don't preach at abandoned intersections in the middle of nowhere. They're shamelessly provocative and don't give a shit how people see them. Greenpeace goes out into international waters to stop Japanese fishermen from killing whales. They don't moralize people on the sidelines. Anti-female genital mutilation activists were not so submissive. They did not give a damn what parents thought. They did not bother to try to educate them. They called for the law to be changed so that parents who mutilated baby girls were jailed. You do not educate people out of committing crimes. You do not educate rapists and serial killers out of their habits. You jail them and imprison them. They also disregard any cultural arguments and push for laws that are international in scope. I don't understand this new 4 Powers of Foreskin campaign. The previous I Did Not Consent campaign was working. Intactivists have taken 3 steps back and are now trying to keep it fun and lighthearted, and are trying to market foreskin like it's some cheap-ass product. People will not take such a campaign seriously. Such a campaign makes intactivists look like a bunch of sex-obsessed fetishists. It doesn't help that so many of them are gay or reach out to the gay community at gay pride events. The previous campaign may have been offensive to detractors, but at least it came off as attempting to be rational and sane to mainstream people and the people on the fence. The current intactivist community should not be scared at offending people. Successful human rights movements have never been afraid to offend people. Wanting to win people over and be nice comes across as meek, and people will instinctively see it as weak and not respect a tame, family-friendly movement. Also, the current intactivist movement seems too concerned about being friendly to females. While the intactivist movement should not seek to alienate women for the sake of it, and should accept their help if they offer it, they should not seek to pander to female sensibilities and stifle men expressing their anger while doing so. The movement is also too family-friendly. It is trying to attract the wrong demographic. It is almost disrespectful the way the movement ignores the victim demographic, men. in particular circumcised men. In fact, young single men aged 18 to 25 seem to be the least represented demographic amongst intactivists. I have not met one male intactivist who was under age 26. For some reason, gay men, Jews, and nurses are way overrepresented, and the leaders of the movement are all geriatric women or married men. Well, I think there's nothing wrong with this per se. I can't help but think this is the product of deliberately trying to be as unthreatening to the mainstream as possible, or trying to worm their way into pre-established niches. The fact that intactivists are unwilling to reach out to college-age men and to agitate on campuses where these kinds of debates happen on a regular basis should speak volumes. Young radical men should be the voice of the movement, not old people, not LGBT, homosexual, intersectional feminists, not women. Radical feminist transsexuals like Hanna Hilda have been invited to speak at intactivist conferences only to blather on about male privilege and toxic masculinity. A demographic of people who do not have legal protections from genital mutilation do not need to be disparaged and told they are shit for just being male. In fact, young men have always been the backbone of every revolution and social movement. It makes absolutely no sense to sideline them from a movement that claims to represent them. Members of the Intactivist movement like Bonobo 3D are ban-happy and are more than willing to promote feminists. There has to be talk about misinjury and the empathy gap for men. It is the empathy gap for men that leads to circumcision still being in place in the 21st century, in spite of the internet providing easily accessible medical information to all. Soon as a commenter tries to talk about male issues, Bonobo 3D will ban you right away. I strongly suspect there's a radical feminist occupation of the intactivist community, and that it needs the steel-toed boot out right away. An anti-male hate movement does not belong inside a male human rights movement. It can't be a coincidence that body positivity is a feminist cause, and that the intactivist community infested with feminists is taking up a foreskin positivity cause. Feminists who claim to be intactivists have consistently protested to circumcision being called rape or it being compared to FGM. This is rich considering the fact that feminists claim that we live in a rape culture and that nearly all normal heterosexual activity is rape. Feminists claim that rape has nothing to do with the sex and that it is about power. Circumcision fits the bill perfectly, as it involves the violent penetration of a sexual organ, but it doesn't involve any direct sexual gratification of the perpetrator. By their own absurd definitions of consent, circumcision is rape. I've even heard absurd things like mothers who circumcise their sons are victims of doctors who are not providing them with the right information. I'm sorry, but this is pure nonsense. If a car salesman sells you a lemon, I could understand you claiming to be a victim of fraud as you were hoping to get a working car out of the deal. A mother is not going to be using her son's penis, I hope. She is not a victim of anything. Rhetoric like this is designed to appeal to regret parents, and in particular regret mothers, who are all intact. Regret mothers who have sincerely learned and are regretful for what they have done can play a support role in the movement, but they can never be the centerpiece. Doing so will only derail the movement away from the victims who are its driving force. Feminists do not want men speaking about their issues. Why should we allow feminists to speak on behalf of an issue that is so personal to men? Feminist co-optation for any male human rights movement is a death sentence for that movement. It is for these reasons that feminists can play no role in intactivism, not even that of support. Feminists have a history of destroying any space they invade. We don't need hateful feminists or moderate feminists that give them cover, and we don't want them. The only way feminists can help is by organizing with other feminists. Feminists already have great influence. They could change things overnight if they wanted to. That said, the intactivist movement does not need to be monolithic nor too exclusionary. It's specific enough where it can accommodate a range of political ideologies. Nonetheless, it must state these following things clearly and make it their priority to communicate these things. Circumcision should be outlawed, leading to stiff prison sentences. Circumcision is due to misandry and discrimination against the male sex. Genital integrity is a right women have, but men do not. Circumcision has no health benefits, as countries that have high circumcision rates have higher rates of STDs than countries that have lower circumcision rates. Circumcision is child abuse and torture of helpless babies. People who knowingly circumcise their children after being given the facts are child-abusing scum. These 5 points should be the main points we're trying to communicate to the public. We have to make it clear that we disapprove of cutter parents and that they deserve negative feedback and disapproval from society. Natural intact men do not care about people saying bad things about their uncut penis. There's no need for foreskin positivity movement. From personal experience, I can tell you that my foreskin has been neither detrimental to my social or sexual life whatsoever. I don't exactly have what you would call a healthy sense of self-esteem. However, I can tell you that any man that would either mutilate himself or his son for social approval, or even to please an intimate partner, has problems far deeper than mere self-esteem. In fact, a foreskin positivity movement will make pro-circumcision cut men think that normal men are uncomfortable with their intact penises, and that they are reacting to their mocking by cut men. It will actually reinforce many cutter ideas about cutting your baby so that they can fit in. Body positivity makes intactivists look like a bunch of insecure crybabies who desperately want to fit into mainstream society. I like my foreskin, but not any more than I like my feet, even though my feet do not give me any sexual pleasure. Believe it or not, I've actually met intactivists that would rather lose a hand than their foreskin, which is neither on point nor very logical. If I was held captive in some sort of torture dungeon and my captors wanted to cut my feet off, the last thing I would do would be to talk about how great feet are. Cutters are not motivated by any altruism. Stop trying to appeal to any sense of their humanity. They have none. Intactivists already have the highest ground possible. Foreskin chopping is globally not the norm. The onus is on genital mutilators to prove that what they are doing has some merit, which it doesn't. There's no need to try and normalize something that is already normal and requires not doing anything at all other than leaving your child's body alone. Also, I disapprove of the sexual pleasure aspect of pro-foreskin discourse, It comes across as hedonistic and is likely to alienate men who have already been under the knife. You're not going to win over cut men by telling them that they've been reduced and that they are less of a man. Sexual pleasure is not so easy to prove one way or another. If society is so messed up and anti-male that it cuts up the penises of babies, it is not really going to care about male sexual pleasure. Intactivist should not be framing itself as a feel-good alternative lifestyle choice. Doing so will consign us to the same sort of fringe category as vegans and hippies. Not cutting off the foreskins of babies should be mainstream, and the practice of baby dick cutting needs outlawing. A few years ago, I would have said that intactivists were doing a good job. Not anymore. The way things are going with intactivism, they might actually be detrimental. One of the common retorts of cutters is that intactivists are obsessed with baby penis. Presenting themselves as a bunch of gay-friendly foreskin fetishists is not helping the cause. There's even a video by Bonobo 3D called Circumcision is a Gay Rights Issue. Not only is this on its face incorrect, but how are videos like these going to help the cause in any way, shape, or form? Circumcision affects all men regardless of race or sexual orientation. No baby is circumcised because it is gay. Your average man is not gay. Couples that have children are not gay. I have absolutely no problem whatsoever with homosexuals in the intactivist movement. Gay men are victims of misandry just as much as straight men. However, intactivists are trying to be a subsection of the LGBT movement. This will drive your average straight male away, even if they are not homophobic. It will certainly not convince expecting straight couples to leave their child alone. I also don't understand this obsession with focusing on expecting mothers. I have seen some very awkward conversations in the streets between intactivists and pregnant women. 3 to 6 months is not enough time to change someone's opinion on circumcision so radically. Even if a pregnant woman says that her mind has changed, there's no way to know whether she will follow through. It makes intactivists look like they're begging and being aggressive and or socially obtuse at the same time. If intactivists are so focused on changing the minds of parents, why not reach people when they're very young, long before they even decide to have kids? Men are the ones with a penis. It makes a lot more sense to convert them when they're young so that they have time to really understand the issues should they ever have kids. Intactivists really need to focus more on recruitment and discipleship. We need dedicated activists who are willing to spread the word themselves and take action. Intactivists love to interview parents that protected their child. However, single people have far more time and money to actively promote a cause. Young men in particular are going to be the most likely to take the risks necessary to really advance our agenda. In particular, we should be reaching out to young men that are already involved in some sort of activism or dialogue. Hijacking political debates would be a great way of reaching engaging minds that are not afraid of controversy or conflict. I'm still amazed that intactivists have not forced their way into the whole abortion debate. I know from personal experience there are literally people on both sides of the issue that support us. I really get the impression intactivists have given up on any sort of serious strategizing whatsoever. They seem to be a loose collection of individuals doing their own thing and protesting in their own way. They will come together for some big event, but they never try to create some sort of consensus or long-term plan. Even the locations they choose are totally random and lack any strategic value. I have even seen videos of intactivists protesting at empty beaches on a cloudy day, only to be chased away by people that want to enjoy their day off. If you want to upset people's comfort bubble, do it in a coordinated fashion and place where you will have high impact and get publicity. Pick a place where people are already in a frame of mind to discuss controversial or political things. Be an agent of chaos in a crowded location. Be a troll, but a troll with an agenda and a sense of humor and creativity. Many intactivists have even confided in me that it might take 30 years to make a gradual difference and that intactivism will never be a mass movement. When intactivists try to appeal to the gay community and expecting mothers, it tells me that they're just trying to infect pre-established niches and that they've given up on any sort of political struggle to create their own niche. They don't want to have to deal with overcoming obstacles or resistance. They're not willing to put up the movement as a whole in the spotlight. They're not even trying to come up with a distinct ideology, platform, or lexicon. They're just trying to add something to the alternative, healthy, organic lifestyle hippy-dippy demographic. I'm sorry, but foreskin should not be on the same level as frisbee golf and granola bars. I don't even see the point of intactivists engaging crunchy mamas in the breastfeeding demographic. It's almost as if intactivists are fishing for some sort of congratulation as kind and loving parents. Being moderate in of itself is not bad. Every movement needs a moderate wing for good optics and recruitment. The problem is that the current intactivists have awful PR, marketing, and fundraising. They don't reach out to celebrities or politicians that agree with them. The greatest irony is that for a movement that tries to be family-friendly and positive, they have really bad optics. When they are aggressive and shocking, it is done in the worst kinds of ways. Inflatable penises and foreskin booths make intactivists look like loons. What's even more shocking is bringing very young children to such events. If I wasn't supportive of the goals on some level, I would think intactivists were some sort of strange new age cult of the penis. A lot of intactivists are also dysfunctional and lack boundaries and discipline. A lot of intactivists have severe self-esteem and sexual orientation issues. I can't help but feel that a lot of guys use intactivism as a form of therapy. Although this is not too surprising and not necessarily entirely bad for the movement, it can become a serious problem problem when it gets in the way of the goals of the movement. I can't tell if this is a result of their lack of organization or a cause of it. I've noticed a lot of intactivists are hyperfixated on penises themselves and sexuality in general. Many are traumatized by what they have lost. Most of them seem to be one-trick ponies that don't have any other serious interests or political beliefs. Almost all are overly concerned with the medical aspects of circumcision. The problem is the medical establishment has a vested interest in protecting itself and will never look at the ethics of circumcision objectively. It never has. Medicine, until relatively recently, practiced lobotomies, electroshock therapy, and even considered homosexuality a disorder. It is a fool's errand to try to convince the medical establishment to be guardians of humanity. Most doctors are not even research scientists. Gay men got their rights by protesting and even rioting, not by convincing psychiatrists to remove homosexuality from the DSM. Intactivism is a human rights movement. We need to maintain our frame of reference at all times that circumcision has absolutely no medical benefit. Debating the medical establishment only makes them look like we're trying to change their opinion on matters that the public defers to them. Debate is important, but it has to happen in the right places. The shame and embarrassment of discussing circumcision in public must be attacked. We must not fall into the pitfalls of a cultural relativist debate. We must stand by the idea that any form of genital cutting is wrong anywhere in the world. We must not be embarrassed to speak the truth. We are not here to educate, we are here to state the obvious. If intactivists want to concern themselves with raising awareness, they should do so at the highest levels of society. Politicizing this issue will raise awareness at every strata of society. We need to find out where all politicians stand on this issue. This issue is too controversial, politically inconvenient, and quite frankly embarrassing for us to expect mainstream politicians to talk about unprompted. Whether they don't know because they don't care, or they don't care because they don't know, is irrelevant. We need to force the hand of politicians so we know who to go after. It's not good enough to be having these conversations in private or on the internet, or even with the medical establishment. We need enemies and we need targets. Another problem is the fact that people that do think it's an issue are not willing to prioritize it and dedicate time towards building a movement. Most intactivists have no way of gauging their success and don't even seem like they want a movement. They seem utterly content feeling like they're contributing to the glacial decline of circumcision. They seem to shun any sort of serious organizing or outreach efforts, and all their strategizing seems to be done in private circles. If you look at all the mainstream intactivist channels on YouTube, none of them discuss strategy with each other in a back-and-forth dialectical way. If a bad movement occupies a niche, a new healthy movement will not grow. The current intactivist movement has become stagnant, stale, and repetitive. They're not even willing to protest at new locations. There needs to be a split within the movement so that all issues come to the forefront and are discussed openly. If intactivists were willing to work with more radical or diverse elements, it wouldn't be a problem. But the fact that there's no transparency, they run things from behind the scenes, and shun any discussion of strategy proves that they are a detriment and must be replaced completely. At this point, intactivists would better be seen as a bunch of hardcore gun-toting, violent fringe ideologues than a bunch of hippy-dippy concern troll crunchy mamas. Your average person is unaware of the intactivist movement, and the people that are aware don't take them very seriously or with the necessary gravitas. On some level, we want mainstream society to fear us. We are cultural hijackers, and we need to be very jarring and unsettling to the mainstream. Unless we politicize this now, we cannot hope for a ban 10, 20, or 30 years down the road. There are already politicians all throughout the United States fighting this at the state level. Even if we suffer political defeat after political defeat, we will be changing the minds and shifting the cultural landscape. If intactivists believe what they say, they need to put their money where their mouth is and start taking what they do more seriously. Genital mutilation is a sober and horrifying topic. It is not something that can be made appealing to the mainstream through gimmicks, costumes, toys, and marketing ploys. It is an uphill battle, but it can be won, and won much sooner than we think. The general public might be apathetic, but they're not as dumb as you think. We don't need huge numbers of people on our side to generate public dialogue. Circumcision only exists because of public apathy towards misandry, not because of fanatical beliefs. Probe cutters will fold in the face of an organized and determined resistance. We must be that resistance, and the time is now.